Hey everyone. So, if you've been keeping an eye on the Cardano ecosystem lately, you might have noticed a massive surge of on-chain activity, and it's all pointing to one protocol, SURF. The numbers are getting way too big to ignore, so today we're going to follow the data and break down exactly what's causing this tidal wave of momentum. Let's dive in. When you see this much on-chain activity move this quickly, it's a pretty clear signal, right? This isn't just random noise. It feels like a real tide of momentum building around a single protocol. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into the data to really understand what's causing this swell. Okay, so let's start with the numbers, because honestly, they tell a pretty dramatic story. This data is really the key to understanding the sheer scale and speed of what's happening right now with SURF. So the first big number we have to look at is the total value locked, or TVL. That's basically all the money users have deposited into the protocol. And right now, SURF is closing in on a staggering 11 million ADA. For any single protocol on Cardano, that is a massive amount of capital. But here's the thing, it's the speed of this growth that's really wild. Of that almost 11 million ADA, a full 2 million of it was added in a single weekend. A single weekend. That's not a slow trickle, my friends. That is a floodgate opening up. And get this, we even have a pretty good idea of where all this liquidity is coming from. The reports are pointing to something called the SNEK pool, which is a specific community and token that already exists in the Cardano ecosystem. This tells us the growth is being driven by a dedicated, organized community, and that's a really powerful thing. Okay, so we've seen the what, this huge surge in capital, but now let's talk about the why. What's the cause behind all this? To understand that, we've got to look at the core design of the SURF protocol itself. What is it about this thing that's making it so attractive? Sometimes the project's own words say it best. Their motto is pure DeFi at your fingertips. And that really signals a focus on simplicity, on accessibility, kind of getting back to the core ideas of decentralized finance. And based on the numbers we just saw, that message is clearly hitting home. So the real engine driving all of this is a concept they call full revenue sharing. And the model is just incredibly straightforward. The protocol makes money from fees as people use it, and then 100%, all of it, gets distributed directly to people who hold the SURF token. No weird, complex stuff, just direct value back to the holders. And here's how that whole cycle actually works. It's pretty simple. First, users provide liquidity, which is just locking up their assets to help the protocol run. As other people borrow and lend using that liquidity, the protocol generates fees. Then, like clockwork, every 15 days, 100% of those fees get paid out. It's a super clear, predictable way to earn. So, the model sounds great on paper, right? But what about the actual results? Let's take a look at the tangible payoff, the real earnings this system has generated for its community so far. And yeah, the results are really impressive. To date, the protocol has generated and paid out almost 500,000 ADA to its users. We're not talking about some theoretical value here. This is real yield being delivered directly into participants' wallets. And here's what might be the most crucial part. Because the earnings come from protocol fees, from people actually using the platform. It's not just based on market speculation. It doesn't matter if the markets are up or down. As long as people are borrowing and lending on SURF, the token holders are earning. Now, this kind of sustainable yield is great for attracting everyday users, but it's also putting a huge blip on the radar of the bigger players. So now we're going to shift our focus to the whales. These are the large holders whose strategic moves often signal a really high degree of confidence in a project. So the big question is, what are these whales actually doing on-chain? It's not just that they're depositing funds and walking away. No, they're making some very specific, very strategic financial moves that are definitely worth a closer look. Okay, so here's the play we're seeing. Whales are taking these massive, long positions on an asset called STRIKE. Now, what that means is they're basically making a huge bet that its price is going to go up. They're supplying almost 1 million ADA's worth of assets just so they can borrow around 700,000 ADA against it. It's a classic leveraged play. And to make this really concrete, let's just zoom in on a single actor. There is one whale in particular whose position is so big that it perfectly shows the level of conviction behind these moves. I mean, just look at these numbers for a second. A single person or entity has put up 250,000 STRIKE tokens as collateral just to borrow 235,000 ADA. That is a highly leveraged, high-conviction trade. You simply do not make a move that big unless you strongly believe you know where the market is headed. And that, of course, brings us to the $1,000,000, or I guess in this case, the $250,000 ADA question. What do they know? What information or insight is fueling this level of confidence? We can only guess, but wow, it is a powerful signal. So all this crazy whale activity is happening as we speak, but you want to know the really interesting part? This is all taking place before the protocol's next major evolution. So let's take a quick look at what's actually on the roadmap for SURF. So the timeline here is pretty clear and it's aggressive. A security audit, which is a critical step for any DeFi protocol, is happening right now. And then just ahead, the team is targeting May of this year for the launch of their V2 mainnet. So not very far away at all. And let me be clear, V2 is not just some minor update. The plan is to introduce big-time incentives, with the explicit goal of just pouring gasoline on this fire to grow that TVL even faster. The ambition here is crystal clear. They want to create one of the absolute best lending experiences on all of Cardano, period. So let's just put all these pieces together. We've got a massive surge in capital, a really simple and powerful revenue sharing model, and we have smart money making these incredibly confident bets. And this is all happening before the V2 launch brings major new incentives. With all this momentum building, you have to ask yourself, is this just about SURF, or are we watching the start of a whole new chapter for lending on Cardano? It's definitely something to keep a close eye on.